Welcome back to the Fat and the Devious podcast. So today is just Connor and I. Last episode was about Sasquatch, and I would like to make a few corrections. So from the previous episode, one mistake I made was I said that Klaus Schultz is gonna control the world. I actually meant Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schultz is a electronic musician. So Klaus Schwab is the enemy, not Klaus Schultz. Maybe we'll put Klaus Schultz intro music or something. And then second correction would be that I said that Van Gogh was a visionary for his time and he was ostracized because he was smart. I want to kind of retract that because I think he was ostracized not because he was misunderstood, but because he was cutting his ear off and was generally psychotic. So with those two things out of the way, Connor, what is the worst pizza restaurant out there?
I kind of like all pizza. Worst one would probably be Bamford. No, probably be... The worst pizza I ever had was at Deep Run Elementary School.
And what state is that
I still remember it to this day. It's in Maryland.
All right.
Elkridge, I think. Elkridge, Maryland. There's a school called Deep Run, and they have horrible pizza.
I bet the education department getting dissolved didn't help anything, but the pizza's just gotten worse. I had there was 3 elementary schools I went to, 2 of which are worth noting. There was, so the second one had really good pizza, and it was pizza every Friday, and it was like, I don't know if it was catered, like I don't know if it was like Little Caesars, but it was like really good. And the thing is, it let you take multiple servings, so you could get like a slice, and then everyone would, eat and then leave, and then there'd be a bunch left, and you could just get as much pizza as you wanted. They just let you just take as much as you wanted, which is great. And then the third elementary school I went to, terrible, worst pizza ever. Like the most, like, how do I put this? Only like the most brain dead iPad kids could choke that down their throat. It's terrible. And then junior high, the pizza was good. High school pizza was good. And then but yeah, I feel you.
My Wi-Fi crashed.
Oh, you did?
My Wi-Fi crashed for a second. But yeah, anyway, Deep Run was uniquely bad. Every other school I've been to has had decent pizza. I just remember the pizza at Deep Run was so bad that it like left an imprint on my mind for over a decade about how bad it was.
You know what? I hate square pizza. Like pizza
it was
boats.
Square. It was like square pizza that tasted like cardboard.
It has ground beef on it. It's terrible.
You're saying that.
Ground
beef, square.
Yeah. Trayson came over to my house, and he'll probably hear this podcast in like a year or so. Came over, and we were watching a really terrible movie. He brought not Little Caesars. He brought Chuck E. Cheese pizza, like, and not even like the real kind. He brought like Chuck E. Cheese pizza from the grocery store. We were watching this terrible movie, and we're eating Chuck E. Cheese pizza, and then I think it was Voodoo Mountain Dew. Like, just such a weird combination that it just gave a weird vibe. It's another weird pizza memory I have. So I think Connor is having more internet issues. Anyways, so what I was going to say is the topic today is the April 20th conspiracy regarding Donald Trump and the Insurrection Act and martial law. And we are going to also cover Project Bluebeam. And I think we'll start with Project Bluebeam first. Connor is just troubleshooting Wi-Fi right now, but I will use this as an opportunity to just get right into it. So Project Bluebeam has multiple stages, and the best way I can describe this is there's the New World Order conspiracy and the Illuminati, and I don't think either are really literally real, but I do think the ideas of these conspiracies like in theory could work kind of as like a metaphor. And if you look into the history of the Illuminati, it was split off from the Masons in Bavaria, Germany, and it eventually it was secret societies of the sort were banned, and it probably either went underground or it failed. And I believe it failed personally. Other people think it went underground, but one interesting thing is to be a Mason, you have to declare a belief in some sort of gods. You have to be a theist or a deist to join. At the very minimum, but the thing that made the Illuminati interesting is that it was to be a member of the Illuminati, you had to declare the non-existence of God. So you had to be an atheist, and the Illuminati only they only recruited from high degree Masons, so they would try and convince Masons there is no God, then they had to join the Illuminati, and then they went underground, but they were kind of revived during the novel, the Illuminatus trilogy, and there was a Playboy editor who was spreading a lot of conspiracies of this sort as well, but I need to look more into that. And there are some groups that claim to be a continuation of the Illuminati. The Ordo Templi Orientis claims to be the Illuminati, but that's formed by Aleister Crowley, and he makes a lot of weird claims, so yeah. So Project Bluebeam, and what's connected to the Illuminati is the New World Order. People think that there's a cabal of people who are omnipotent and all-knowing. They just control everything, see everything, know everything. Basically, because government and God are kind of intertwined, and they believe, and it's just kind of like an extension of, people want a group out there to know everything that's going on. They want to believe there's someone that is in control, that knows all the answers, and I think the Illuminati and the New World Order is just a part of that. And usually when people bring up the New World Order, they'll bring up groups such as the World Economic Forum, Bilderberg Group, United Nations, European Union. Connor, are there any others that usually come up?
The Trilateral Coalition or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like Interpol and other things people like to bring up.
FEMA?
Like, are we not allowed to have global cooperation? Why does every time countries come together, it's got to be evil? Why can't they just be working together, because we live in a hyper-connected world where everything is dependent on each other?
Why would countries want to come together? They would never get together out of the kindness of their heart. They would get together for a political reason. The reason is it's super profitable. Why would I waste resources spreading all of my industries across the entire country when I can just produce 3 major resources and export it to other countries so we can maximize our efficiency in gathering those resources, and other countries can give us the resources they're really good at. So it's just better that way. People seriously think we went to the moon just out of the kindness of our heart. No, the military went to the United States went to the moon because they wanted to put nukes there, or they wanted to militarize it. They didn't just go there just because it would just be fun. They had plans
we
for
went
it.
to the moon to destroy the Russian spirit.
We went to the moon to destroy the Anunnaki Soul Cube.
That is true, but we failed. We never...
Yep, the Chinese rover found the Soul Cube back in 2022. We failed. I mean, it's an entire moon, so pretty hard to find. It's searching in the entire continent of Australia. They
found the Soul Cube, but the aliens showed up and offered them a deal to not destroy it.
Yeah.
It's once you find it, you're let in on it, but if you don't find it, you're not. When Trump became president, the aliens had to send somebody to inform him that yes, there is a Soul Cube, and no, you can't destroy it. They always got to inform the new president about the Soul Cube. It's the first thing they do.
You just put a cursed image in my head of Donald Trump sitting in the Oval Office with a gray alien talking about the Soul Cube. I mean, it was already bad enough to see Kanye in the Oval Office. I mean, actually, an alien in the Oval Office would make more sense than Kanye in the Oval Office.
Elon Musk's token child, the one he cares about for some reason. He's a terrible father and ignored his 19 other kids, but he's redeeming himself by having this one kid as an icon.
X-12. Yeah, for some reason, that guy, X-12 is his favorite for some reason. Why? Because it's the only kid who's going to hate him. Maybe his kid is actually an alien this whole time. His kid's really annoying. I'll say that. I mean, Donald Trump definitely doesn't like his kid. Every time you see Donald Trump and X in the same room, he's always really mad. He always looks pissed about having to be in the same room as him. And then you can hear Musk's kid turn over to Trump and say, "You need to go away." So rude. And
the kid is the only one in the room who's not wooed by him. Trump wants to be the fantastic Mr. Fox, who's at the center of everything and the best, but then the baby is better than him.
Yeah, or there's that stupid video of Trump and X walking across a field, and you can tell Trump is just trying hard to just not pay attention to him. Man, I don't blame Trump. I think that kid's annoying. If I was Trump, I would just be "Hey, I'm okay with you being in the Oval Office, Elon, but can you just leave your kid out of it? I'm sick of that guy."
I think having Elon in the Oval Office is a really bad look.
Obviously. It's funny. In a Kanye interview, Kanye said, Kanye said he would eventually be the president, and this is what the interview Tucker Carlson. He said, "Oh well, if I was president, I would have Elon sleep in the Oval Office. Sorry, not in the in the Oval Office. That way, at that point, he'd be sleeping with Kanye. Just in the White House. He wanted him to sleep in the White House. So he predicted the 2025 presidency. I guess it's Kanye though. It's not really much of an accomplishment."
He didn't predict that martial law will be declared in 15 days or 9 days. 9 days.
Yep. You have 9 days to upload this episode, or else. So, do you want?
The title should be "Will the World End in 9 Days?" Like Project Bluebeam or something.
Yeah. Well, the title needs to be something that people would still want to watch it after April 20th. Like, I found this funny video. It was like 10 reasons the world is going to end on December 3rd. It was like predicting alien invasion, and I didn't believe it for a second, but I'm like, all their views are just gonna like tank after December 3rd. It's a joke. I bet the guy who was claiming that feels really silly now. I mean, what was it? The Bart Ehrman's book about, what was his book about the apocalypse? I think Bart Ehrman's book was just called Apocalypse, but he talked about, it was about, like, it said 88 reasons that Jesus will return in 1988, and then nothing happened. And then next year, 89 reasons Jesus will return in 1989, something like that, which is just ridiculous. Oh, no, it wasn't Apocalypse. The book was called Armageddon, what the Bible really says about the end, which I listened to the audiobook, and it was really good. I wish it kind of went more over apocalyptic literature as a genre, rather than just focusing on the book of Revelation. I also wish you focused more on Cerinthus, who was supposedly the guy who wrote the book of Revelation, but it was very good in terms of providing an analysis on the text, especially because people have no clue what they're talking about regarding the book of Revelation.
You know what we could title the video to make it relevant even after the 20th?
What?
Say what we think will happen on the 20th.
All right. Actually, here, you want to talk about the book of Revelation for a second? That's kind of relevant before we get into...
I can't ramble about the book of Revelation, but I can ramble about something I just saw. So I mentioned the other day to my brother that Twilight was a Mormon book, and like he didn't get the joke because it said like Protestant art, and it showed Veggie Tales, and said Mormon art, and it showed Twilight. He didn't get it, and then I told him like it was made by a Mormon author, and I'm in his room right now because they're all gone, and guess what's sitting on his desk?
Twilight.
Looked over, and it's Twilight. He has Twilight.
Because you brought it up?
Yeah, so words have consequences, people. And now my brother's reading Twilight. I hope he's not.
Did you know there's a sequel to Twilight, and it's the same book, but just all the characters are gender swaps? That's the only difference.
Well, you mentioned that, and I thought that sounded like really, not epic. I mean, no way. But I checked it out from the library. I didn't even get around to reading it, though, because I don't like romance novels, but I did check it out from the library. Words have consequences.
I mean, there's probably worse books you can read.
True.
I'm trying to just find like a list of all the apocalypses. Let's see. Well, I know a lot just off the top of my head. So one misconception right off the bat is that the book of Revelation was written by John the Beloved. First and foremost, John the Beloved, it's debatable whether or not John was the beloved apostle, because the book of John never really refers to John as John the Beloved. It's kind of just, if you read between the lines, but that's still an interpretation, so there's some debate on whether John is the beloved disciple. And next, so there's two Johns, well, three, I guess, kind of. So there's John the Beloved, John the Revelator, and John of Patmos. So John the Revelator and John of Patmos are the same, because, John the Revelator is, Revelation. And also another correction is, people call the book of Revelation the book of Revelations, which is stupid. If you watch the X-Files, almost every single episode about the book of Revelation, they call it the book of Revelations, and it just drives me crazy. So John of Patmos and John the Revelator are the same. Actually, let me just make sure of that real fast.
The same?
Yeah, they're the same. So, here's the thing. So, Book of Revelation was written around 95 to 96 AD. And, I'm using AD because we're talking about Christianity here, so it's appropriate. 95 to 96 CE. Jesus died around 30 CE. That's the right date, right? Around 30 CE.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30
28
CE.
to like 32, sometime in that time
And
frame.
John was already an adult, obviously. He was a fisherman, so let's say, he would have had he's writing the book of Revelation. If he lived that whole time, that would be 65 years after, and people died earlier back then, so he was definitely dead by then. And not to mention, John couldn't write. He was a fisherman. Fishermen couldn't write. And there's a verse that said I'm pretty sure there's a verse that said they're illiterate specifically. So they were fishermen, they couldn't write. Some people say, oh, well, maybe it was copied down, like he spoke to a scribe, and the scribe wrote it down. Maybe, but that's not really how the Gospels work. It's not really present in the New Testament. So John the Beloved was separate than John the Revelator, but the LDS interpretation is, I think, obviously this proves to be an issue because people want John the Beloved to be John of Patmos. So that's where the secret scroll of John comes into play, which is a part of Pearl of Great Price, or maybe it's a part of D&C. I think it used to be in D&C and then they put it into the Pearl of Great Price, but I think some LDS denominations still keep it in D&C. So the scroll of John. So first, I should say the book of Abraham was translated. Well, his version of translating specifically from the papyri, but then eventually book of Moses, he just learned how to just automatically write. I guess just God was like, okay, well, we just gave up on having to have physical documents. So he just
for the book of Moses, he looked at the scrolls and he got inspired by the scrolls.
No, that's the book of Abraham. That's the book. The book of Abraham was the one where he tried to translate it, but then didn't know how, then accidentally created scripture. That's what the church claims now, the LDS Church. And then
the book of Moses is different.
The book of Moses, that was during the inspired translation of the Bible. So that's when he was translating Genesis, but it was just a really long section that it became its own book. But people mix up Book of Moses with the Book of Genesis because people think. People always talk about in Genesis how the part where Moses confronts Satan, or the part in Genesis where Cain becomes Master Mahin, or those are the big two. But those actually aren't in Genesis. Those are in the Book of Moses. If you read the entire...
I've literally never read that. What the fudge? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's in the Book of Moses. So if you read there are versions of the Joseph Smith translation, the inspired version of the Bible, or if you read the inspired version, it will be inserted into the book itself. So some people who grew up reading that version will claim that. If you go to seminary, they will make those claims that those kind of like streamline it so it's all one, but they are separate. I should make that distinction. So in the Secret Scroll of John, which was part of that kind of just automatic writing process, just channeled. I don't know if he was still using the Seer Stone at that point, but he channeled it via automatic writing, generating scripture. It was published in the Times and Seasons. It wasn't really a magazine; it was like a bulletin. Published in Times and Seasons, and then it was put into D&C. Then it was put into Pearl of Great Price. And the Secret Scroll of John just goes over Jesus giving blessing each of his disciples, and John's gift that he gave him was that John would wander the earth until he returned. And this has some precedence in Christian legend. It was like the Wandering Jew narrative, which is somewhat is based in anti-Semitism. So the story goes that there were Jews mocking Jesus at the cross, and then Jesus said, in the verse said that some of you will not taste death until my return. That proved to be an issue because 2,000 years later, that means that those people at the cross would still be alive. So then the story comes in. Says well, some of them are still alive, because when they're making fun of him, he cursed one of the Jews, saying that he would have to be cursed to wander the earth until he returned. So according to the Christian legend, there's one of the Jews at the cross is cursed to wander the earth until Jesus returns, and that narrative is probably what eventually became the narrative of John being immortal. And I remember kind of an apologetic response that was really stupid. It was that there's a story about...
So what you're saying is that guy is Bigfoot?
No, that's Cain.
So he's the Yeti.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Are Yeti and Bigfoot different people?
The Yeti and Sasquatch? Yes. But they might share a common ancestor, which is the Gigantopithecus. We went over it.
I haven't watched the episode yet.
Okay. From what I can tell, so the story there's a story of John the Beloved being thrown into a barrel of boiling oil, and don't quote me on this. This might need some more verification, but this is from the Acts of John, which is part of the Acts genre, which is just about just books recounting the Acts of Apostles, and he was thrown in by the Roman Emperor Domitian, and then thrown into a barrel of boiling oil, and then he survived. But this is the same as the whole narrative of Peter being crucified upside down, which is also present in apocryphal literature. But the thing is, why are we picking and choosing it's like proof sourcing. Why are we picking and choosing the sources we like to align with our narrative? The Acts of John isn't in the LDS canon, so if we're accepting that, we'd have to accept a lot of other texts as well. And you can see this with like Hugh Nibley, for example, where he claims that the Jaredite barges are present in Israelite literature because he cites a section from the Zohar, which is completely different. The Zohar and the Jaredites are completely unrelated. The Zohar was written about like 1,000 years later after the Jaredites probably even later, because the Jaredites came way before the Nephites. So it's like that, just a proof sourcing. So that should be enough proof that John the Beloved and John of Patmos are different. Oh, in addition, the language of the Gospel of John was also not written by John, and the letters of John were also not written by John either. And between the three of those, the language and writing style is completely different. Revelation isn't really written very professionally in Greek. It's written not as well as the Gospel of John, for example. And what I should say is the book of Revelation draws from apocalyptic literature. Do you know anything about apocalyptic literature, Connor?
Like, wasn't it like a common idea at the time? I don't know which, like...
Do you know much about Jewish mysticism?
I don't know a lot about Jewish mysticism.
Okay, so one of the earliest forms of Jewish mysticism was, at least that are, I guess, kind of a more like contemporary times. I guess you could count Israelite mythology as kind of mystical, I guess, but that's beyond the point. Apocalypticism started... Well, so first off, apocalypse means the revealing of knowledge, not really a doomsday event. So the idea of apocalypticism was gaining these visions and either things to come or just divine knowledge. And a lot of time, what kind of the environmental pressure for this genre of literature, and you can see apocalyptic texts, the book of Daniel, book of Ezekiel, and the book of... What's the third one I'm forgetting? Yeah, just those two, Ezekiel and Daniel. I think there's probably a third one. And I think, yeah, those two are the main ones. The Romans took over Israel, and they couldn't really... They were really oppressed, so they couldn't really say what they wanted to outright, so they had to hide their messages behind symbols. So that's why the book of Daniel, for example, has so many strange symbols, is because they were trying to hide the true meaning. And then the book of Ezekiel, people theorize he was literally just abducted by a UFO, which is funny. And then, so apocalyptic literature had a lot of symbolism and that kind of thing, and it was about revealing knowledge, mainly in the short term. People think those predictions were for the future. They're mainly for the present, or even the past. Sometimes they're written in reference to past events, and then they claim the text is written before just to legitimize it. So, and then apocalypticism, eventually, Jesus would be considered an apocalyptic prophet. He talked about the imminent end, how he's going to come back, basically just a doomsday.
Has anybody ever prophesied about something that would happen in 2,000 years?
Well, I think no one really gives a specific date because it always has to be vague. There's like cults about like the millennium, the doomsday cults in the 90s prophesied of like the end of the world being at the year 2000, even though the actual millennium wasn't even going to be until a year or two later. Because Jesus wasn't born on the 0 AD. He was born, I believe, 2 BC, around there. So 1998.
But yeah.
1998 would have been the millennium, or it was like give or take. It could have been like 2 BC, 2 AD, somewhere between. So Jesus.
But nobody was ever writing a book intending people to read it thousands of years later.
Yeah. So Jesus had some apocalyptic ideas, and eventually Paul had some ideas that kind of align with Merkabah mysticism, which is chariot mysticism. Let me just make sure I'm getting that right. Or Merkabah sometimes. Yeah, chariot mysticism. Oh, just a correction. Ezekiel would be Merkabah mysticism, not apocalypticism or literature, it says here. Which is more about kind of, how do I put this? More about, like, exploring God's kingdom, or exploring, like, I shouldn't really make claims. From what I remember, it was more about, like, exploring palaces and that kind of thing, and passwords, not really the revealing of knowledge, that kind of thing, like in the book of Daniel. So we have, through Judaism, apocalypticism, and that gets carried over to Christianity, and let me just see if I can find a list. Alright, so we have, this is just a few. Apocalypse of Goliath, Apocalypse of Paul, Apocalypse of Peter, Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius, Apocalypse of Samuel of Colomun, Apocalypse of Stephen, Apocalypse of Thomas, Apocalypse of Elijah, Gnostic Apocalypse of Peter, First Apocalypse of James, Second Apocalypse of James, Coptic Apocalypse of Paul. I would like to add a few of my own. There's multiple apocalypses of John. There's also the Apocalypse of Adam, the Apocalypse of Abraham, and the Apocalypse of Moses, which are pseudepigraphal texts, as well as apocalyptic. And pseudepigraphical literature is kind of its own thing. So the two I would like to mention is the Apocalypse of Paul and the Apocalypse of Peter. Apocalypse of Paul bears some similarities to the first vision with Joseph Smith, in that it was, a lot of these texts have to make claims to legitimize themselves. In the case of the Gospels, they had to tie themselves back to the book of Isaiah. That's their version of legitimacy. In the book of the Apocalypse of Paul, what the author had to do was claim that it was written by Paul, but since Paul was dead, he wrote it from his perspective as uncovering a Apocalypse of Paul that was sealed in a stone, like a little stone box underground, and then an angel revealed the location of the text, and then he published it. So, and that's similar to,
was it written on gold plates?
The Apocalypse of Paul, was it written on gold plates?
What was it written on?
Paper. There's nothing else you can write on besides paper, especially back then. Like, you could chisel stuff into tablets, but plates are kind of unsubstantiated. There is the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's the Copper Scroll, but that was a treasure map. There was one more thing. Oh, so Darius I, there was a stone box that held coins, and there was metal plates with just transcribed words on it, and the inscription said, "Darius the great king, king of kings, king of countries, son of Hystaspes, and Archimenid. King Darius says, this is the kingdom which I hold from this Sasi who are beyond Sogdia and Cush, and from Sind, This is what Ahura Mazda, the greatest of gods, bestowed upon me. May Ahura Mazda protect me in my royal house. So that's obviously...
Ahura Mazda, the god of... wait. That's the god of...
Ahura Mazda?
Ahura Mazda, is that the god of the older one?
I'm not sure. It rings a bell, but I don't really remember. So, Achaemenid...
the name, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's the one before Judaism. It's the one that made Judaism.
Oh, Zoroastrianism. Yeah, that's why I remember Ahura Mazda. That's from Zoro. Let me just double check that. Ahura Mazda.
Really? Zoroastria's god? I think that is.
Yep.
Yes!
Yeah, so this is pretty far off from any sort of Israelite or Nephite text, and I've encountered people who have made claims comparing Zoroastrianism to Mormonism just because there is kind of like a Satan-like figure, Angra Mainyu, and the person claimed that Ahura Mainyu was Angra Mainyu was Satan, and since Zoroastrianism is about the battle of good against evil, then it's about the sons of perdition against God's kingdom, which would represent the war in heaven in Revelation. But the thing is, there's a fallacy in that sometimes it can be, and there's similarities. It can be assumed the latter thing originates from the same source as the original, but really the original influenced the latter source. So, Mormonism bringing similarities to Zoroastrianism, that just shows that Zoroastrianism was preserved through Christianity, not the other way around. And I should mention Darius I is the foundation tablets in his box. They were around, so the Achaemenid Empire was somewhat around where...
Why they say that, though, right?
Sorry, what?
Why they say it was inspired by Mormonism, even though it came before it, right?
Well, no, because some Mormons believe that, so they think that Mormonism is the one true religion, so anything else is either a perversion of it, a human construct, or a fragment of the truth, which I believe there's a term for that.
So they believe that, like, Adam had the gospel that, like, the modern Mormon church has, and that when everyone broke away, they just took modern Mormonism and changed it, so all similarities to Mormonism are proof of that to them. Right.
Sorry, come again?
So, like, they said, like, Adam had the perfect gospel truth.
Well,
that all religions that...
Well, I think most people make that claim. I mean, he knew God, like, face to face, so I think most faiths would make that claim. But go on.
So any similarities between any religion and Mormonism is proof that it's splintered from Mormonism.
Some would argue that, yes. I shouldn't make generalizations, but I have encountered people who make those claims.
Convinced.
Yeah, and the Darius box is mainly an apologetic response. Yes, it is from around 600 AD, around the same time of the plates. And yes, it came from relatively the same region. No, it has no connection. So, let me see. So, authorship and date of Apocalypse of Paul. The author of the work is unknown. The work opens with a discovery narrative that explains while the Apostle Paul wrote it, the book was then buried beneath the foundations of a house in Tarsus, which is Paul's hometown. And then an angel ordered the compiler to dig it up, and the discovery happened during the reign of the Emperor Theodosius I. And the Christian author Sozomen wrote that he investigated this claim, and an elderly priest of Tarsus had no recollection of the bizarre event occurring. Rather, it was transparently an attempt to explain how a new work of Paul could be published. The author may have been familiar with 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul discusses how he knew a person who visited the third heaven. That's the Merkavah connection, the mystical connection. The work implies that the person was himself Paul. The author of the Apocalypse of Paul was probably Egyptian. Some scholars, such as Emiliano Fiore, have argued that it was more specifically composed at Pachonian monastery in Egypt, although other scholars believe the evidence is insufficient. Here, can you say so? Do you have any thoughts on that?
In Egyptians? That's kind of cool. I don't know why you'd choose Paul, though. It doesn't make sense. If he was dead, why would you pick him? Why would you pick somebody that's dead, like recently? Why not pick somebody who died a long time ago?
Yeah.
Really just pick Paul because he's like the only one they could think of to like be like the reason people read it. Like it'd be cooler if you had said like Abraham wrote it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there are
You can't really
texts
disprove that.
That date back to, that they claim back to Abraham. And a bit of a correction here. I claim that the Apocalypse of Paul came first. It came after the Book of Revelation. So, you know, the literary genre went on, but we only pay attention to the Book of Revelation, which is kind of ignorant a bit, I would say. And there's the other one, Apocalypse of Peter, which was written in the early 2nd century and is also apocalyptic literature. And I've read this one, and it's funny because it says that it basically goes over basically the experience of what it's like to be in hell. And there's
the one where you
list.
mentioned the loins.
Yeah, we'll get there. So, blasphemers are hung by the tongue. Those who deny justice are set in a pit of fire. Women who adorn themselves for the purpose of adultery are hung by their hair over a bubbling mire. The men who had adulterous relationships are hung by their genitals next to them. Yep, hung by their loins. Oh, man. Yeah, it's...
That's my favorite book.
There's at least one guy who would enjoy that. Like, come on. Murderers and their accomplices are tormented by venomous creatures and numberless worms. Women who aborted their children are in a pit of excrement up to their throats, and their children shoot a flash of fire into their eyes. I think that's like a Warhammer reference, isn't it?
That's basically what happens when you die.
Parents who committed infanticide have the mother's breast milk congeal into flesh-devouring animals that torment both parents. Their dead children are delivered to a caretaking angel. Persecutors and betrayers of the righteous have half their bodies set on fire, are cast into a dark pit, and their entrails are eaten by a worm that never sleeps. Those who slander and doubt God's righteousness...
Don't sleep.
Yeah. Gnaw their tongues and are tormented with hot iron and have their eyes burnt. Liars whose lies cause the death of martyrs have their lips cut off, while fire in their body and entrails. Rich people who neglected the poor are clothed in filthy rags and pierced by sharp burning stones. Those who lend money and charge interest stand up to their knees in a lake of foul mountain blood. All right, so most bankers on this earth are going to end up in hell because they're charging interest.
I feel like this can kind of like misinterprets the point of hell, though. Not to punish you for sin; it's just separation from God. The punishment for all sin is the same: destruction and separation from God, and all sins are forgiven equally by God. So it doesn't make sense that like one banker would get like stoned, another banker would get hung by his loins, another banker or whatever would get like covered in poop. But that doesn't make it. That kind of like feels like the guy who wrote that didn't understand the point of hell.
So you're saying that all sins are on the same level? Is that what you're trying to say?
Like, all sins are the same. Like the small sins and big sins are all just. You can't be by God, so you're going to hell.
Well, there's the unforgiveness denying the Holy Spirit. That would be a higher sin.
Is that one actually listed, or is that?
No, I'm talking about the New Testament. And let me find the verse. Mark 3:29. Let me just find it out.
Is being stabbed forever equally as bad as being punched forever? I mean, the stabbing would hurt more, but it's infinite. So is it infinite pain?
You would stop.
Either way.
You would stop caring eventually. Okay.
So your mind gets wiped every 30 seconds, so you don't even know that it's been that long.
Oh, dang. All right, Mark 3:29. But he who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is subject to eternal condemnation. So that would be, sins are forgivable, but if there's one that's unforgivable, then that would mean it's a higher sin, right? So that would maybe imply that sins have different degrees of severity? Or are you thinking of something specific that goes against that?
Well, I don't think that means it's a worse sin. I just think you can't be forgiven for that because, like, denying the Holy Spirit, you're just denying the power of God, and that's the only way you can be saved.
Oh, so it's not worse. It's not worse. It's just denying the method that can save you at that point. So
I interpret it, but I don't know.
And it's from Mark, so Mark was pretty much the first gospel, so that may have been an earlier thing that was kind of elaborated upon later. So getting back to the Apocalypse of Peter. Rich people who neglected the poor are clothed in filthy rags and pierced by sharp burning stones. Those who lend money and charge interest stand up to their knees in a lake of foul matter and blood. Men who take on the role of women in a sexual way, and lesbians fall from the precipice of the great cliff repeatedly. Makers of idols either scourge themselves with fire whips, or they beat each other with fire rods. Those who forsook God's commandments and hated demons burn in flames. Those who do not honor their parents fall into a stream of fire repeatedly. Those who do not heed the counsel of their elders are attacked by flesh-devouring birds. Women who have had premarital sex have their flesh torn to pieces. Disobedient slaves gnaw their tongues and unceasing just over and over again. Those who give alms hypocritically are rendered blind and deaf and fall upon coals of fire. Sorcerers are hung on a wheel of fire. So, my thoughts is that around this time or later, prior to the Protestant Reformation, especially during the medieval times, there had to be. They used a lot of scare tactics to get people to give offerings to the church and to the various religious leaders. So they had to have things like this to scare them into buying indulgences, so that they would be saved. So I don't really take this kind of literature too seriously, at least Christian apocalypticism during this period, because it seems like a scare tactic, and it doesn't really have too much basis in actual depiction of hell, because the depiction of hell evolved over time. In Old Testament, it is Sheol, and that's mainly just like the underworld. It's not really hell. It's kind of just like, I don't know, just kind of like, it was kind of more boring than it was torture. And then there's...
Well, God is the source of everything that's good. So if you're not in his presence, you can have nothing good. So you can't feel anything good. So you can only feel misery.
I mean, you can just be numb. And that's the Christian interpretation. I'm talking about Sheol, which would be under Yahweh.
True.
And then during the New Testament, it was obviously developing more at that point. Then that's when the idea of Satan evolved. And then later, during medieval times, is when a lot of the more contemporary ideas of hell started developing. So this gets a little bit controversial, because you'll have denominations like Unitarian Universalists who will claim that everyone's saved. Then you have Catholics who claim that only Catholics can be saved. And then you have Protestants who claim that all Protestants are saved, only Catholics go to hell. But I should say that not all Protestants think that. There's diversity within Protestantism. But pretty much all Catholics think that only Catholics can be saved, because they view themselves as the one true church. Mormons believe it's somewhat similar to Swedenborgianism. So Manuel Swedenborg, who came before Joseph Smith, claimed it's somewhat similar to the Orthodox perspective of hell. You put yourself through hell. So in Orthodox Christianity, hell is just the lack of the presence of God. It's just, or I should say, hell is just how you interpret the presence of God. If you are sinful, the presence of God is going to be your personal hell. But if you're righteous, the presence of God will be heaven. So if you are constantly sinning, there will be a place for you, but you will be held back by your own transgressions. And there will be some people who will never change. They'll just constantly be self-consumed in their sin. So that is hell, because they can't escape it. It's eternal, because they will never change. And that's basically what Emanuel Swedenborg believed. He thought hell is just a place for people who choose to go there, because they will never change. They can leave anytime they choose to repent, but they just never do. And the LDS and Joseph Smith in DNC eventually elaborated on this kind of idea, in that you have different stages of... Let's see, I actually have a bookmark that goes over the different plan of salvation. So, premortal life, and then the mortal life, physical death, first resurrection, paradise, and spirit prison. And that's just kind of where people are separated before, if you die before the millennium. And then there's a second resurrection after the millennium. And then Satan is released during the final conflict. Final judgment, and the final judgment would be after everyone is processed through paradise or spirit prison. So everyone has the chance to repent. they have the chance to free themselves, which would mean majority of people are saved, unless you literally choose to reject it, which would be very few people. And then even then, there is celestial, terrestrial, or telestial, and all three of those are all heaven. Like, even if you're in one of those, you're still going to be fine. And then telestial is said to be...
So good you'd kill yourself to go there.
Yeah, better than Earth. So even then, that's still somewhere worth pursuing. And then outer darkness is just where the excess is thrown. It's just
my seminary teacher said that no one would go to outer darkness.
Yeah, it's possible.
He said that it would have been better for the sons of perdition if they hadn't been born, and because God is just and all loving, they weren't born.
Yeah, well, that's speculatory. Some have speculated that they just get destroyed just so they don't have to suffer. They just get reincarnated, something like that.
I was just saying what some people have said.
Yeah, because for example, if you have like a tumor in your brain, then you might become like a sociopath, and then are you really in control of yourself if you like mentally cannot like be a good person, for example? So you're a sinner, but you can't help it. But this is all highly up to interpretation. So one thing that did influence the Book of Revelation was the sibylline oracles. So the sibylline oracles, let me just make sure I'm saying that right. Sibylline oracles. Yep, sibylline oracles. So the sibylline oracles were a collection of prophecies given by sibyls, and they were at first given by Jews, but then eventually some kind of Gnostic, well, not really Gnostic, there was some Hellenism involved, so like Greek influence eventually, and then eventually some Christian belief. And eventually, so it was basically propaganda, like they would claim, oh, God gave me this revelation, but it was actually just the government putting stuff into the prophecy to further demean the Jews. And eventually, some of this literature got into the Book of Revelation, and I think there was the part I'm thinking of involves a scroll in the sky. I'm pretty sure that's the part that was from in the Book of Revelation. So we have these influences over the Book of Revelation that no one mentions when they bring it up. People think the Book of Revelation came up spontaneously, but there's all these influences of the sibylline oracles, apocalyptic literature, and that kind of thing. And not to mention, it was very influenced by oppression by the Romans. So there are these environmental pressures that created the Book of Revelation, and no one talks about the authorship either. And one of the guys people claim wrote the Book of Revelation would be people. I mean, obviously people think it's John of Patmos, but people also attribute it to Cerinthus, who was known to have lived a kind of lavish lifestyle, thinking like sleeping around is good, like living a life of pleasure is good. And I don't think he was Gnostic, but there is some Gnostics back then who thought that since the world wasn't real, like it was basically just a simulation, it was nothing in the material world is real. That meant that you should indulge in as many worldly pleasures as possible, just to illustrate how worthless the physical realm is, so that you learn yourself how worthless the physical realm is, because you can see through the lies of the demiurge when you indulge in the pleasures of the material realm, and you can realize through those pleasures that everything is fake. Yeah, but that's just some Gnostics. I don't think the Sethians or Valentinians believed in that. It's some other kind. That may have been later Gnostics.
When you win the lottery and surround yourself with worldly possessions, you still feel empty inside.
Just a side note, all those people who go bankrupt after winning the lottery, that's so stupid. Like, do they have no self-control? Like, all you have to do is just put it in the bank and live off the interest. That's all you have to do.
Well, they were poor to begin with. Like, the reason they were playing the lottery is because they're poor. And they weren't poor because they were good at spending money.
Yeah.
So the kind of person who would win the lottery is the kind of person who would benefit least from winning the lottery.
Yeah. So
it's literally just a tax on the poor.
I think the lottery is actually to catch time travelers. It's not even for us. It's to catch time travelers.
That is a good point.
So Cerinthus may be the alleged recipient of the Apocryphon of James, the name which is largely illegible, A late 2nd century Christian sect headed by Caius of Rome alleged Cerinthus was the true author of the Gospel of James and Book of Revelation. According to Catholic Encyclopedia, additional light has been thrown on the character of Caius's dialogue against Proclus by Gwyn's publication of some fragments from the work of Hippolytus. From these, it seems clear that Caius maintained that the Apocalypse of John has at work on the Gnostic Cerinthus. Oh, he was Gnostic. Okay, that proves a lot then, because he may have been part of that sect that believed in indulging in worldly pleasures. Book of Revelation, what is attributed to John by Christians before that time, 3rd century theologian Tertullian indicates that all John's foster churches, the churches of Asia Minor, were traced back to the beginning all rest in the Apostle John as its author, and it received same recognition in all other churches. Irenaeus makes consistent remarks. So I think the reason a lot of these Gospels are attributed to the Apostles because they don't understand that the book, just because it's named the Gospel of John, Gospel of Luke, Gospel of Mark, doesn't mean it was written by those figures. It just means that it's just Gospels with those their name in the title. And I was a fly on the wall for I heard of these guys talking about the Bible, and they said that the Trinity predated Trinitarian doctrine in the Bible itself because Polycarp made claims about it. But the thing is, Polycarp lived like 100 years after Jesus, and he was the disciple of John. So, just for the sake of argument, if the book of John was written by John, then that means Polycarp would have been influenced by John. But I don't think. What I'm trying to say is that Polycarp lived around the same time as the book of John, so that would have been his influence. It doesn't mean that the Trinitarian doctrine goes back to Jesus. It means that Polycarp was influenced by the book of John, and that is influence that the Trinitarian doctrine predates the creed, which is untrue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that makes sense. It'd be like saying that's actually would be a really bad analogy. I was going to use Hitler in that analogy, but I'm not going to. Never mind.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about Revelation enough. So I think that kind of discounts the validity of Revelation, and I don't find any issue with discounting the validity of Revelation because it's one of the least read books in the New Testament. No one really takes it seriously, and most people who do misinterpret it. So, and it's very dangerous too. A lot of people, for example,
Dad told me not to read the book of Revelation when I was a kid because he said you'll get wrong ideas.
That's what your dad said?
Like, don't read it because like you're gonna misinterpret it and get confused about the gospel.
He's right to a certain extent. I mean,
that is true.
Like, I don't think I mean, yes, it is probably one of the most interesting, but if you're trying to learn about Christian doctrine, that's probably not a very good introduction. So I think we've talked about Revelation enough. And the reason we bring up Revelation is because April 20th, there is a conspiracy that Donald Trump is going to declare martial law over the border crisis. And what have you heard about it? Have you heard anything about it?
Well, I've heard a lot of speculation. I think it's going to be another case of nothing ever happening. He's going to declare the Insurrection Act or whatever, and he's going to send more guys to the border, and nothing is going to happen.
Is that why you sent the image?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you look at the time? Nothing. Because nothing has ever happened, so nothing will happen. Right.
So, I'm going to read. So, next topic is Project Bluebeam, which is we're familiarizing ourselves.
So we could still discuss more into the what's going to happen in the 20th. I think it is interesting. Like, let's do Project Bluebeam first, because you know a lot about that.
This is where I'm going to cut off the first part of 3 episodes. The original recording was about 3 hours long. I'm just going to cut it into 3 parts. That means the Sasquatch and Earth Science Part 2 episode will be pushed off until the 21st, which I've already finished and scheduled for release then. And just one minor correction I would like to make just during editing this is that the Darius box was from 600 BC, not 680. I just misread the distinction there. So Project Bluebeam was a conspiracy that made its rounds decades ago. And it was supposedly, when I brought up the New World Order earlier, this would be the plan to establish the New World Order. And while I do not think Project Bluebeam has really any credibility, so really at all, the ideas it puts forward, I think, have some merit. So it has multiple stages, and the purpose of Project Bluebeam is to create bring about a new age religion